Hey guys, this is Crystal Middleton from Daughter of the King. If you're new to my channel, welcome, and if you have subscribed, welcome back. So I know it's been a while since I've been up here, but a lot has been going on. But one thing that I really wanted to touch was on the topic of faith. And we're here today, so we will dive into different instances where we see faith happening in the Bible. And the first person that I want to talk about is Abraham. So if you're interested, stay tuned. So the first part that we will be looking at is Abraham on the mount. And if you see me looking down, it's because I'm looking at my notes, okay? So this was the climax of Abraham's relationship with the Lord. At this point, Abraham had waited 25 years for his child of promise, right? And we see that after a long wait, after him and his wife doing things their own way, we see now that God has actually blessed Abraham with a child of their own, right? So Genesis 22, 1-19. I will read the first few verses. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the 2 of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, "Father." "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "The fire and wood are here," Isaac said, "but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the 2 of them went on together. So I stop here at verse 8, and we will do what exactly was happening in these verses. Abraham and his wife now had their promised son, right? But then it seemed as if this promise had started to become the central focus of their heart's desire and the reason why they live, right? And we know that God is a jealous God. So because God saw that Isaac was their pride and joy, has taken that place where God used to be, God then decides to test Abraham to see if he would have sacrificed his one and only son, well, the promised son, which God has granted to him, which he and his wife has been praying for so many years, right? So this is Abraham's experience on the mount. So the first point is when God called to Abraham and Abraham answered, "Here I am." In verse 1, it says, sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. So this was after Abraham made a treaty with Abimelech about a well he had dug and claimed. So when Abraham said, "Here I am, Lord," this was his response to him being available to God, right? So our availability is the first step to growing and going higher with God. So we have to be present in order to be in the presence of God. We can't be, if we're too busy with the hustle and bustle of life, many times we would see ourselves missing out on hearing from God or getting God's best, right? So in order to hear from God, we have to intentionally come into his presence, right? We have to make time for God. We have to close off, distance ourselves from the outside world and spend quality time with our Father in order to hear from Him. It's the same thing when it comes to our relationship with maybe our friends or our partner. In order to make the relationship work and in order to make it successful, we have to spend intentional time with that, intentional and quality time with that person, and we have to communicate to them. But if we don't, then many times the person would feel abandoned or ignored. And the same with God. We can't expect for us only to go to God when we want something. We have to spend time with God, not only for him to hear from us, but so we can hear from Him as well. Communication is a two-way street, and it's the same that goes with prayer, right? When we pray, we not only give our requests and supplication to God, but we wait. We stay silent until we hear from God. And sometimes He doesn't speak. Sometimes He just wants us to enjoy that His presence, right? And when we do that, we hear clearly from God. We hear clearer from God without the distractions from the outside world. So Abraham made himself available to God when he was able to hear from God, God's instruction for him to sacrifice his only son Isaac. Now, I personally believe that we give way too many credit to the devil when we get tested, and many times if we look carefully on our lives, we may see that there are many Isaacs in our lives. We may see that we're putting our job, maybe our partner or something else in place of God. And when God sees that happening, many times He will test us by either taking away that blessing that we have, or a promise that we have been waiting so long for, just to test to see where He stands in our lives, and many times this test reveals to us where our heart is, and we either fail or pass this test. When we pass this test, it means that we have recognized where we have went wrong in putting other things in place of God, and then we do a 180 and repent and ask God to forgive us for putting idols in place of Him, and God may or may not bless us back with that same blessing or better, right? But if we happen to fail this test, as we sometimes do, then it just causes a delay in our life with our blessing, and it just requires God to work on us even more. Now in verse 3 it says, "Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about." So we see here that Abraham rose early, and then he went to the place of which God had told him. So this is quite important, because him rising early the next morning shows Abraham promptness, right? Maybe if he had had more time to think about it, a couple of days, maybe he would have backed out of what God had instructed him to do, right? As humans, we don't like difficulties in life. So if God had told one of us to sacrifice our son, or something that is dear and near to us, right? If we had 2 days to a week to think about it, I think a lot of us, maybe even myself included, would have backed out or be hesitant to do it. But we see here in this example that Abraham didn't back out. He rose up early and he prepared he got his servants ready, and he just had his mind on being obedient to God. He got up early and he did what he had to do to go and sacrifice his son Isaac. So we see here prompt obedience, and we see preparation in order to please God, right? Prompt obedience is very important. In the other verses, from verse 9 I believe is where I left off, to verse 19, I will give a synopsis of what happened. I think many of us are familiar with this story, right? So we see now Abraham told his servants to stay, and he took his son Isaac up to the mountain, right? But Isaac is noticing that his father had everything prepared for this sacrifice except the sacrifice itself. So of course Isaac went ahead and asked his father, "Father, where is this sacrifice?" right? And Abraham, out of faith, he just said that the Lord will provide. Now he said this because he knew that even if he had to have killed his son, God has resurrection power. He had the power to have raised Isaac back from the dead if he needed to, right? So Abraham, and he knew that God was the one who blessed him with Isaac anyway, so he knew that Isaac belonged to God. So he was prompt in his obedience, and he went on and do what God had instructed him to do. So now Abraham and Isaac went up to the mount, and he bound up Isaac's hand and feet. He took out his knife ready to do the deed. But the angel of the Lord came right on time and told him, Abraham, don't kill your son Isaac. The fact that you're about to do this to the one and only son whom you love, it shows that you love God more than their son, right? And Abraham was counted as righteous because he had faith. He believed in Jesus and he was obedient, right? So the angel of the Lord stopped Abraham from killing Isaac. And then, as Abraham said, even if he didn't believe it at that time, but God allowed a ram to appear in the bushes, which is the animal that Abraham ended up sacrificing, right, instead of his son. So the fact that he can put his own son ahead of how he was feeling. I mean, a father who has been wanting a son for so long. So our next point is verse 2, which says, Then God said, Take your son, your only son whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you. Anywhere is nowhere with God. Places and points of commitments mean a lot in your walk with the Lord. There is a place to meet with God. There are characteristics of the place conducive to divine encounter. The mount is different from the valley. You have to go where God can meet you. Places away from the familiar environment may add to your concentration. So the place we meet God has to have several things in place, right? It has to be void of distractions for one, and it has to be a quiet place. That's why many people have prayer closets, right? Prayer closets are normally a small place in which somebody can go, they can close, and they can lock themselves off from the noise and the distractions from outside, right? Because it's in that place where you fully surrender and you are fully vulnerable to God. And in that quietness, you can hear clearly from God. There are many instances in the Bible where Jesus took time apart from the disciples and from the people who were following him in order for him to have spent quality time with his Father, in order for them to commune with each other. Jesus was able to hear God's clear instructions because he went off to a quiet, solitary place. And hear the blessing which Abraham received from God because of his obedience. It says in verse 15 onwards, it says, The angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time and said, I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand in the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring all nations on earth will be blessed because you have obeyed me. And in 19 it says, Then Abraham returned to his servants, and they set off together for Beersheba, and Abraham stayed in Beersheba. So isn't this an amazing account of faith in God, right? It challenges me to be a woman of faith, a woman of obedience, right? And to put actions behind my faith. This is such an inspiring and encouraging story, which I hope encourages you all. And this here ends our first faith series. Again, in the weeks to come, we will go into 3 other characters who also were tested and they passed the test. If you're enjoying this series, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.